I never wanted to be the man with the perfect revenge story. For 25 years, I built my life around my family, financial security, a comfortable home, college funds for Emma and Jason. I was the steady one, the planner, the foundation. Then one night, after discovering her affair, my wife Karen looked me in the eyes and said, "File for divorce, and I'll take everything. The house, the kids, every penny. You'll have nothing." She was so confident, so dismissive of my life's work. But sometimes, the people who think they hold all the power are the ones who've left themselves most vulnerable. This is how my wife's arrogance became her undoing, and how I reclaimed not just my family, but my dignity. If you've ever been underestimated, you might recognize what happens next. The alarm chimed at 5:45 a.m., as it had for 25 years. I silenced it quickly so Karen could sleep another hour. Morning routine: coffee brewing, Wall Street Journal unfolded at the kitchen table, spreadsheets open on my laptop. Financial analyst habits die hard, even at home. I reviewed our family budget while Emma's soccer tournament fees and Jason's SAT prep costs stared back at me from the screen. Money was comfortable, but not unlimited. Every dollar had its purpose in our family's future. Karen appeared at 7 o'clock, already dressed for her marketing executive role, phone in hand. "The Andersons invited us for dinner Saturday," she said, not looking up from her screen. "I'll be there," I replied, closing my laptop. "Made you coffee." She nodded absently, her attention elsewhere. This had become our rhythm, functional, predictable, increasingly distant. Yet I took pride in the life we'd built. The 4-bedroom colonial we'd purchased when the kids were small, the family vacations documented in photos along the hallway, the stability I'd always prioritized. The kids thundered downstairs, Emma asking about permission slips, Jason complaining about his history teacher. I handled both questions while Karen scrolled through emails. "Dad, can you come to my game tomorrow?" Emma asked. "Wouldn't miss it," I promised. Karen glanced up briefly. "Thomas always makes it to everything, doesn't he? Some of us have to focus on careers." I caught Emma's eye roll and gave her a gentle smile. The comment stung, but I'd grown accustomed to these small dismissals. What mattered was the family's stability. I'd always believed that was worth any sacrifice. That evening, I settled into my monthly ritual of paying bills and balancing accounts. Karen and I maintained joint accounts for household expenses, though we each had personal accounts for discretionary spending, a system that had worked for decades. The credit card statement appeared on screen, and I frowned. Several charges from high-end restaurants I didn't recognize. A hotel charge from a Tuesday when Karen had claimed to be at an overnight marketing retreat. A jewelry purchase for $780 that had never appeared on her wrist or ears. "Dad?" Emma appeared in the doorway. "Can you help me with this calculus problem?" I quickly minimized the screen. "Sure, honey. Give me a minute." After helping Emma, I returned to the statement, methodically highlighting each questionable expense in yellow, adding notes in the margin. Nearly $3,200 in unexplained charges this month alone. Karen arrived home late, dropping her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. "Karen," I said carefully when she entered our bedroom, "I was paying bills tonight and noticed some unusual charges. The Bellamy Hotel, Antonio's restaurant." She set down her phone, her expression shifting almost imperceptibly. "Client meetings. The company credit card was having issues." "And the David Yerman purchase?" "A gift for my assistant's wedding," she replied smoothly. "She's been with me 5 years. You know how important my team is." I nodded slowly. "Will the company reimburse these expenses?" "Already submitted. Should be in next week's deposit." She disappeared into the bathroom. I returned to my spreadsheet, adding a note to check next week's deposit. Something felt wrong, but I had no concrete reason to disbelieve her. We'd built this life on trust. Later, I heard Karen's phone chime with a text. She reached for it quickly, angling the screen away as she read it. Her lips curled into a small smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The next morning, I wandered into the yard to escape my circling thoughts. Our neighbor Jim was trimming his hedges and raised a hand in greeting. "How's the renovation coming?" I asked, grateful for the distraction. "Slower than molasses in January," Jim laughed. "Contractor says 2 more weeks, but I'm not holding my breath." We chatted about property values and the neighborhood association until Jim mentioned, "Saw Karen's car at the Westview Hotel bar last Friday. Thought you two might have had a date night." My stomach tightened. Must have been a work function. "Probably," Jim agreed, looking slightly uncomfortable, though it was nearly 10 when I was leaving my dinner meeting. "They keep you marketing folks working late, huh?" "Apparently so," I said lightly, though my mind was cataloging the discrepancy. Karen had told me she was having dinner with her colleague Stephanie that night. Back inside, I sat at my desk, staring at the family photo from last Christmas. Karen's smile now seemed practiced rather than genuine. Was I reading too much into normal business obligations? Creating problems where none existed? I thought about our 25 years together, the early struggles in our starter home, the promotions we'd celebrated, the births of our children, the life we'd constructed brick by steady brick. "Don't jump to conclusions," I told myself. There could be simple explanations. Yet I created a password-protected folder on my laptop and began a simple spreadsheet. Dates, times, stated locations, and actual whereabouts when known. The analyst in me needed data before drawing conclusions. Just being thorough, I justified to myself. But as I typed the first entries, a cold certainty was forming beneath my denial. Something fundamental was changing in our marriage, and I needed to understand exactly what I was facing. Over the next 3 weeks, my spreadsheet grew. I added a column for financial discrepancies, almost $14,000 in unexplained expenses over the past 4 months. The reimbursements Karen had mentioned never materialized. I began photographing the odometer in her car when she left for client dinners, and again upon her return. The mileage never matched reasonable distances to the locations she claimed to visit. At my desk, I methodically searched our cell phone records online. One number appeared with increasing frequency, often with late-night texts and calls lasting 30 to 40 minutes. Always when I was asleep or away from home. I sat back, running a hand over my face. The pattern was undeniable, yet I still hesitated to name what I was seeing. 25 years of marriage demanded more than circumstantial evidence. One evening, Karen announced another team dinner and left wearing a dress I'd never seen before. I waited 30 minutes, then drove to the restaurant she'd mentioned. Her car wasn't in the parking lot. On a hunch, I drove to the Bellamy Hotel from our credit card statement. There, in the parking lot, sat her silver Audi. I gripped the steering wheel, breathing deeply. Part of me wanted to storm inside, but the analytical part, the part that had built my career on careful decision-making, held me back. Confronting her now would reveal my suspicions without providing the complete picture. Whatever was happening, I needed to understand its full dimensions before acting. I drove home and added another entry to my spreadsheet. Then I opened our investment accounts and changed the passwords, making copies of all statements for the past year. Something told me I might need them. Saturday morning found me at the golf course with my friend Michael, a ritual we'd maintained for 15 years. Usually golf provided escape from work stress. Today, I couldn't focus on my swing. "You're distracted," Michael observed as I missed an easy putt. Everything okay? I carefully placed my putter in my bag. Just work, I lied. Michael studied me as we walked to the next tee. Known you too long for that, Thomas. Something's eating at you. The fairway was empty ahead and behind us. This was as private as conversations got. Have you, I began, then paused. Have you heard anything about Karen recently? Michael's expression shifted subtly. He took an unusual interest in selecting his club. What kind of anything? He asked carefully. Anything involving her being places she shouldn't be, with people she shouldn't be with. Michael sighed, setting his club down. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. As your friend. He looked genuinely pained. There's been talk. Karen's been seen with a man at Mayfair's and the Carlton downtown. Apparently, he works at her company. Tall guy, beard. They didn't seem to be discussing marketing strategies. The confirmation hit harder than I'd expected, despite my suspicions. How long have you known? I asked quietly. Jenna saw them about a month ago. I told her it was probably a business meeting, but... He trailed off. I'm sorry, Thomas. I should have said something sooner. I shook my head. No, you're telling me now. That matters. What are you going to do? I picked up my driver, focusing on the distant fairway. I'm going to talk to my Uncle James. He's retired family law. Michael nodded. Smart. Whatever you need, I'm here. I appreciate that, I said, addressing the ball. And Michael, this conversation stays between us. Absolutely. I swung, connecting solidly. The ball flew straight and true, landing exactly where I'd aimed. If only marriage were as predictable as physics. That evening, I decided to test Karen's reactions. The children were at friends' houses, giving us rare privacy. I was thinking, I said as she scrolled through her phone at the kitchen island. We haven't had a real conversation in months. Is everything okay with us? She glanced up, momentarily surprised by the direct question. Everything's fine. Why wouldn't it be? You've been working late a lot. We barely talk except about logistics. She set her phone down with a sigh that bordered on exasperation. This is my busy season, Thomas. The Harrison account is demanding. Not everyone has a predictable 9 to 5. I understand work pressure, I said evenly, but I've also noticed unusual expenses. The hotel charges, dinners I wasn't aware of. Her expression hardened. Are you monitoring my spending now, after 25 years? Not monitoring, just noticing discrepancies in our joint accounts. I manage the social aspects of this family, she said dismissively. You manage the investments. That's always been our arrangement. You wouldn't understand the networking requirements of my position. Networking at the Bellamy Hotel? On weeknights? A flash of something, surprise, anger, crossed her face before she controlled it. You're overreacting. If you must know, we use their conference rooms for sensitive client meetings. At 10 p.m., she stood abruptly. I don't appreciate being interrogated in my own home. Some clients prefer evening meetings. Not everyone operates on your rigid schedule. Karen, I'm just trying to understand. No, you're checking up on me because you've always resented my career success, she snapped. Do you know what happens to men who don't trust their wives, Thomas? They find themselves very lonely. She grabbed her phone and walked out, conversation clearly finished. I remained at the kitchen island, turning my wedding ring slowly around my finger. Her defensiveness told me everything I needed to know. The question now wasn't whether something was happening, but how extensive it was, and what exactly she was planning. I needed expert advice. Tomorrow, I would call Uncle James. Our 25th anniversary arrived with practiced smiles and hollow gestures. Karen presented me with an expensive watch I knew we couldn't comfortably afford. I gave her the sapphire earrings she'd hinted at for months. I made reservations at Vincenzo's, I told her. The upscale Italian restaurant had been the site of our engagement. How traditional, she remarked, but agreed to go. We were seated at a corner table, the same spot where I'd proposed a quarter-century earlier. Several couples we knew nodded from nearby tables. I ordered Karen's favorite wine and proposed a toast. To 25 years, I said, raising my glass, and to many more. Karen's phone buzzed as our glasses clinked. She glanced down immediately. Sorry, she murmured, but her fingers were already typing a response. Work emergency. On our anniversary? The Westfield presentation is tomorrow. Crucial account. Throughout the appetizer, she responded to 3 more texts. During the main course, she excused herself for a phone call that lasted 12 minutes. I timed it. When she returned, I was half finished with my meal. Everything okay at the office? I asked mildly. Fine, she replied tersely. Just putting out fires. Across the restaurant, I noticed our friends the Baxters watching our table with poorly disguised concern. Susan Baxter offered a sympathetic smile when our eyes met. Karen's phone lit up again. This time, I glimpsed the preview before she snatched it away. Mark, after the divorce is final, we can stop sneaking around. Have you talked to him yet? How did he take it? The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just an affair, but divorce plans. Plans she hadn't bothered to discuss with me. Excuse me, I said, setting down my napkin. I need to use the restroom. In the privacy of the bathroom stall, I leaned against the wall, processing the revelation. The affair I had suspected, the divorce I had begun to consider possible. But the calculating nature of it, the conversation about my reaction to news I hadn't even received, struck me as breathtakingly cruel. When I returned to the table, I maintained my composure through years of professional discipline. Karen was once again typing on her phone. Shall we skip dessert? I suggested. She nodded absently. Probably best. Early meeting tomorrow. I paid the bill while mentally calculating how much evidence I would need and how quickly I could gather it. The anniversary dinner had clarified everything. This wasn't just an affair, it was a coordinated exit strategy, one that apparently didn't account for me having any agency in the process. Karen had gravely miscalculated. We drove home in silence, Karen still periodically checking her phone. In my mind, I was already cataloging next steps with the detached precision that had served me well throughout my career. Thank you for dinner, Karen said as we entered the house, the perfunctory politeness somehow more insulting than open hostility. Of course, I replied with equal formality. Happy anniversary. She disappeared upstairs while I remained in the kitchen, ostensibly making tea. In reality, I was mentally reconstructing the past year, the increasing distance, the unexplained absences, the financial irregularities that now revealed themselves as preparation. The text message had mentioned divorce as a foregone conclusion. How long had she been planning this? What else had she arranged without my knowledge? My hand shook slightly as I poured hot water over the tea bag. 25 years of shared history reduced to secret exit strategies and deception. The hurt was profound, but as minutes passed, it crystallized into something else, resolve. I thought of my children, now nearly grown, but still needing stability. I thought of our home, purchased with years of careful saving. I thought of retirement accounts and college funds, all potentially at risk if Karen had been moving assets. The passive, accommodating husband might have confronted her immediately, leading to a messy, emotional scene that would accomplish nothing. The financial analyst in me recognized this as a situation requiring strategy, not emotion. Karen had been methodically preparing for her departure. I would need to be equally methodical in protecting what mattered. As I sipped my tea, a strange calm settled over me. The initial shock was giving way to clarity. If Karen and her lover had been planning my financial and familial dismantling, they clearly believed I would be blindsided, reactive, easy to outmaneuver. They had fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. After Karen fell asleep, I returned to my home office and began a systematic inventory of our assets and liabilities, our primary checking and savings, investment accounts, retirement funds, property deeds, insurance policies, children's college accounts. I created a secure cloud storage folder and uploaded copies of all financial statements for the past 2 years. Then I compiled a list of people whose expertise I would need. Uncle James, retired family law. Initial legal consultation. Professional divorce attorney. James would recommend someone. Private investigator to document affair and any financial misconduct. Financial forensic specialist to trace any hidden transfers. I noted potential allies. Michael, who had already confirmed the affair. Jim next door, who had unwittingly provided early evidence. Susan Baxter, whose sympathetic glance at the restaurant suggested she might know more. By 2 a.m., I had drafted a preliminary timeline and action plan. First priority, secure copies of all essential documents. Second, consult Uncle James for legal guidance. Third, gather definitive evidence of both the affair and any financial misconduct. I wouldn't confront Karen until I had a complete understanding of what I was facing and a solid strategy in place. Her text exchange had revealed she expected to control the divorce process, to dictate terms from a position of strength while I reacted from weakness. That mistaken assumption would be her undoing. I closed my laptop and looked at our wedding photo on the bookshelf. The young couple smiling back seemed like strangers now. I carefully placed the frame face down, a private acknowledgement that one chapter of my life had ended. Tomorrow, I would begin writing the next one, on my own terms. I made one final note in my planning document: call Uncle James first thing in the morning. Then I went upstairs and slept soundly for the first time in weeks, the clarity of purpose washing away the paralyzing uncertainty that had plagued me. Uncle James's colonial-style home hadn't changed in 20 years. At 72, he maintained his sharp mind and direct manner that had served him through 4 decades of family law practice. Infidelity and financial misconduct, he said, reviewing my notes at his kitchen table. Unfortunately, common combination. How long have you been documenting this? About a month seriously. The signs have been there longer. He nodded, methodically flipping through my spreadsheets of unexplained expenses and absences. Very thorough. The financial analyst approach. Professional habit. James looked up, his expression softening slightly. I'm sorry you're going through this, Thomas, but I have to say, you've inadvertently given yourself a significant advantage. How so? Most people in your situation discover the affair and immediately confront their spouse. Pure emotion. They tip their hand with nothing in place to protect themselves. He tapped my documentation. You've taken the opposite approach. Karen has no idea, you know, correct? Correct. And you've been documenting meticulously while she believes you're completely in the dark. I nodded. Then you're already ahead, James said firmly. She's making a classic mistake, underestimating her opponent. She sees your predictability as weakness rather than discipline. He pulled a legal pad toward him, drawing a line down the middle. Let's assess your position. Joint accounts? Yes, but I've been monitoring transactions daily. Nothing large has moved. Good. Home ownership? Joint title. Mortgage is 70% paid. We proceeded methodically through assets, debts, and potential custody considerations for the children, though at 16 and 17, courts would consider their preferences. Here's what we know, James concluded. Karen likely expects to claim you were inattentive, focused on work rather than marriage. Standard narrative. She'll want the house, substantial support, and to control the narrative with the children. And my actual position? James smiled slightly. Much stronger than she realizes. Your documentation of her affair and financial misuse of joint funds undermines her claims. Your consistent presence at the children's activities counters any inattentive father narrative. Most importantly, you have the element of surprise. He wrote a name and number on his legal pad. Patricia Reynolds, best divorce attorney in the county. Tell her I sent you. What else should I be doing? Continue documenting. Consider hiring a private investigator to properly document the affair. Patricia can recommend someone discreet. And Thomas, he added, his expression serious, maintain absolute normalcy at home. The moment Karen suspects you know, your advantage disappears. I nodded, feeling a strange combination of sadness and relief. The path forward was becoming clear. She thinks this is about emotions, James said, echoing my thoughts. But courts deal in evidence, and you, nephew, are very good with evidence. Patricia Reynolds's office projected understated competence, tasteful furnishings, discreet awards on the walls, an atmosphere of calm efficiency. The attorney herself matched her surroundings, mid-50s, impeccably dressed, with the focused attention of someone who didn't waste time or words. James speaks highly of you, she said, after reviewing my documentation. And I can see why. Most clients arrive with accusations. You've brought evidence. Her paralegal took notes as we proceeded through my situation. Patricia asked precise questions about finances, the children's circumstances, and my goals for the divorce. I want primary custody, I stated. The house would provide stability for the children through graduation, and I don't want to pay alimony to someone who's been misusing our joint funds. She nodded without judgment. Based on what you've shown me, those are reasonable objectives. The financial misconduct creates leverage. The documented affair helps with the narrative. What are my immediate next steps? First, we need professional documentation of the affair. Evidence gathered by a spouse can be viewed as biased. She wrote a name on her business card. Sam Reeves, former police detective, now private investigator, exceptional at documentation that holds up in court. And financially? Continue monitoring accounts. Secure copies of all statements showing irregular expenses. If you have any individual accounts, ensure Karen doesn't have access. She leaned forward slightly. Thomas, I appreciate your methodical approach, but I need to ask, are you emotionally prepared for this process? Many clients in your position struggle with the transition from planning to action. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on strategy that I'd compartmentalized the emotional reality. And I'm not doing this out of vengeance, I said after a moment. She made her choices. I'm simply ensuring those choices don't destroy what I've spent decades building. Patricia nodded. That's a healthy perspective. Just remember, when we file, this becomes real in a new way. Karen will likely be shocked, then angry. She may make accusations, attempt to turn the children against you, or make impulsive financial moves. I understand. Good. Let's schedule a meeting with Sam Reeves for tomorrow. Once we have his documentation, we'll develop a complete filing strategy. As I left her office, I felt a shifting in my perspective. What had begun as defensive documentation was transforming into an affirmative strategy. Karen had been planning my financial dismantling. Now I was planning something else entirely, a future she hadn't anticipated. The coffee shop was 20 miles from our neighborhood, far enough that we wouldn't encounter anyone we knew. Sam Reeves looked nothing like the private investigators from movies, no rumpled trench coat or world-weary expression. Instead, he was clean-cut and professional, dressed like any other business consultant. "I've reviewed the initial information from Patricia," he said after introductions. "Let's discuss what you're looking for." "Documentation of the affair and any related financial misconduct," I explained. "Enough to establish a pattern rather than isolated incidents." He nodded, making notes. "Based on what you've shared, we're not starting from zero. You have credit card records showing hotel charges, suspicious timeline gaps, and witness observations. That gives us locations to focus on. How long will this take? With the groundwork you've laid, 2 weeks should be sufficient. We'll use surveillance at the locations you've identified, document their meetings, and collect evidence of joint expenses." He showed me examples of his documentation packages from previous cases, comprehensive, professional, designed to be persuasive in court settings. "What about the man she's seeing?" I asked. "Mark something. Works at her company." Sam made a note. "I'll identify him fully. Knowing the affair partner's details often provides additional insights." "How should I behave during this process?" I asked. "At home, I mean." "Complete normalcy," Sam advised. "Maintain regular routines. If you've been asking questions about her whereabouts, stop completely. We want her comfortable, not suspicious." I nodded, understanding the strategy. "And you'll keep me updated?" "Secure communications only. I'll create an encrypted channel for our updates. Nothing that could be discovered on your home devices." By the end of our meeting, I had a clear understanding of the investigation process and timeline. As we prepared to leave, Sam offered a final observation. "Mr. Mitchell, if I may, you're handling this differently than most clients. There's usually more anger, more desire for immediate confrontation. Would anger help my situation?" He smiled slightly. "Not at all. Your approach actually makes my job easier and your outcome more likely to be favorable." He gathered his materials. "I'll begin surveillance tonight. Expect initial reports within 3 days." As I drove home, I reflected on Sam's comment. The anger was there, certainly, at the betrayal, the deception, the casual cruelty of planning my financial ruin while maintaining the facade of our marriage. But letting that anger drive my actions would only weaken my position. Karen expected emotion. She would get strategy instead. I arrived home and greeted her with the same polite distance we'd maintained for months. She noticed nothing different in my demeanor, completely unaware that the countdown to her carefully planned future had just begun ticking in earnest. 2 weeks later, Sam delivered his report, 48 pages of meticulous documentation. Karen's affair with Mark Reynolds, financial advisor at her company, was comprehensively established. Photos, timeline, receipts, hotel records. They had used joint credit cards for their rendezvous. Mark was married as well, adding another layer to their deception. "This is excellent work," I told Sam during our final meeting. "There's something else you should know," he added. "I followed standard procedure and ran a background check on Reynolds. He has 2 prior divorces, both featuring infidelity on his part. He also has significant financial problems, tax liens, a foreclosure last year. Currently renting a luxury apartment he can barely afford." The implication was clear. Mark Reynolds might be interested in more than just Karen's company. With Sam's report in hand, I met with Patricia to finalize our strategy. "We're ready to move forward," she confirmed. "But before filing, I recommend securing your financial position." Following her guidance, I opened individual accounts at a different bank and transferred exactly half of our joint savings and checking balances, a move that was both legally defensible and strategically sound. I left detailed accounting records documenting the transfers. Patricia prepared a certified letter informing Karen of these transactions, stating they were protective measures pending resolution of our marital status, with copies of all transaction records attached. The letter was delivered to Karen's office the following morning. My phone rang 30 minutes later. "What the hell is this?" Karen demanded, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Just what it says," I replied calmly. "I've secured half of our joint assets while we sort things out." "Sort what out? What are you talking about?" "I think you know, Karen. The separate accounts, the hotels, Mark." A moment of stunned silence. "You've been spying on me?" "No, just paying attention. There's a difference." "You had no right—" "I had every right to protect our family's financial stability," I interrupted, "just as you had the right to make your choices. We all make choices, Karen." "Mark says you can't do this," she blurted, then immediately seemed to regret the words. "Interesting that you're consulting him about our finances," I noted. "I've been consulting attorneys about mine." "Is that a threat?" "Not at all. Just sharing my choices, as you've been sharing yours. We should probably continue this conversation in person, don't you think?" She hung up without responding. I contacted Patricia immediately to report the conversation, particularly Karen's admission about consulting Mark. We agreed it was time to accelerate our timeline. For the first time in months, I felt back in control of my life. Karen had been operating on the assumption that I would remain passive, predictable, easily managed. That assumption had just been shattered. Now I waited for her next move, knowing it would likely be emotional rather than strategic, another miscalculation on her part. Karen arrived home that evening, radiating cold fury. She waited until the children were upstairs with headphones on before confronting me in the kitchen. "How dare you," she hissed, "transferring money without discussing it with me, sending formal letters to my workplace. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I remained at the island counter, maintaining calm eye contact. "About as humiliating as discovering your wife's affair through a text message preview, I imagine." Her expression flickered, surprise quickly masked by renewed anger. "You don't understand anything about my relationship with Mark." "I understand enough. The hotels, the restaurant dates, the financial advice he's apparently giving you about our divorce. You've been stalking me." "No, Karen. I've been protecting myself from what you've been planning. There's a difference." She shifted tactics, her voice suddenly trembling. 25 years, Thomas. Doesn't that mean anything to you? One rough patch, and you're treating me like a criminal." "Rough patch," I repeated quietly. "Is that what you call secretly planning to leave your husband while spending joint funds on hotel rooms with another man?" Her facade cracked slightly. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to understand exactly what's happening, and to prepare accordingly." She paced the kitchen, recalibrating. "The children will never forgive you for breaking up this family. They'll know exactly who's responsible." "They already do," I replied evenly. "Emma saw your text messages last month when you left your phone unlocked. She came to me, confused and hurt. I asked her to let me handle it." This was true. A devastating conversation I'd had with our daughter 2 weeks earlier. Emma had discovered the affair independently and had been carrying the burden alone, afraid to tell me. Karen paled visibly. "You're lying." "I wish I were. Ask her yourself, though I wouldn't recommend it. She needs time to process her own feelings about your choices." Karen's control finally slipped. "This is all your fault. Years of your emotional unavailability, your obsession with finances, your boring predictability. Mark actually listens to me, values me." "Mark has 2 previous divorces involving affairs and is currently facing tax liens," I stated flatly. "But I'm sure he values something about you." She stared, momentarily speechless. "I have evidence of everything, Karen," I continued quietly. "Everything. We can do this reasonably, with dignity, or we can do it the hard way. Your choice." She grabbed her keys from the counter. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." As the front door slammed behind her, I heard her on her phone. "Mark, we have a problem. He knows everything." I texted Patricia, Karen confronted, now aware of our knowledge, likely consulting with a fair partner. "Please proceed with filing preparations." The response came quickly. "All documentation ready. We'll file first thing tomorrow. Maintain calm at home." I poured myself a glass of water, surprisingly steady despite the confrontation. Karen would return with new tactics, perhaps tearful reconciliation attempts, maybe threats, possibly financial maneuvers. None would change the fundamental reality. The advantage had shifted decisively. The chess pieces were in motion, and she had just discovered she wasn't playing against the opponent she'd expected. After reviewing all documentation with Patricia, I signed the divorce petition with steady hands. The comprehensive filing included evidence of the affair, financial misconduct, and a request for temporary primary custody. "What happens next?" I asked. "Karen will be served tomorrow," Patricia explained. "Given her attempted access to your secured accounts, I've expedited the process. She'll likely be shocked by both the filing itself and the substantial evidence we've included." How should I handle things at home? Maintain calm and focus on the children. Karen may become volatile when served, possibly making accusations or attempting to control the narrative. Document any concerning behavior without escalating conflict. As I prepared to leave, Patricia added, "Thomas, you've done everything right so far. Remember that emotional reactions now could undermine the strength of your position. The evidence speaks for itself." I nodded, feeling an odd mixture of sadness and resolve. This wasn't how I'd imagined our marriage ending, but Karen's choices had set us on this path. My responsibility now was protecting our children and the future we'd built. That evening, I secured important documents in a safe deposit box, updated my will, and prepared for the next phase. The chess match was entering its critical stage, and I was finally playing to win. I arranged to be present at a distance when Karen was served with the divorce papers. Patricia advised witnessing the service to prevent later claims that it hadn't occurred properly. The process server, a professional woman in business attire, approached Karen as she exited her office building for lunch. From my parked car across the street, I watched the interaction unfold. "Karen Mitchell?" the server confirmed. Karen nodded, looking confused. "You've been served with divorce proceedings." The server handed over the thick envelope. "This contains a petition for dissolution of marriage filed by Thomas Mitchell, including temporary custody orders and financial restraining provisions." Karen's expression transformed from confusion to shock as she realized what was happening. She attempted to refuse the documents, but the server calmly explained, "The service is complete, whether you accept the physical papers or not. I've fulfilled the legal requirement of personal delivery." Several of Karen's colleagues had paused to witness the scene, a public humiliation she hadn't anticipated. She finally snatched the envelope, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "This service has been recorded and documented," the server added, gesturing to her body camera. "Good day, Mrs. Mitchell." As the server walked away, Karen frantically tore open the envelope, scanning the first pages with widening eyes. When she reached the evidence section with photographs from Sam's investigation, she physically staggered. She pulled out her phone and made a call, to Mark, I presumed, her gestures becoming increasingly agitated as she spoke. Several colleagues gave her a wide berth, clearly uncomfortable with the public display. I sent a brief text to Patricia. Service completed successfully, heading home to prepare for Karen's return. Her response was immediate. "Stay calm. Document everything. Call if you need me." As I drove home, I felt no satisfaction in Karen's public embarrassment, only a somber recognition that actions have consequences. She had planned my financial and emotional devastation while maintaining a facade of normalcy. Now, the facade had crumbled. The children would be home from school soon. I needed to be there first, to provide stability during what would likely be a volatile evening. The most important chess pieces in this game weren't financial assets, but Emma and Jason's well-being. That was one principle Karen and I might still share. Karen burst through the front door 3 hours later, divorce papers clutched in her hand. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. "How could you do this?" she demanded, throwing the documents onto the kitchen counter. "Serving me at work, in front of everyone?" "The same way you could plan my financial ruin while sleeping with Mark Reynolds," I replied evenly. "We all make choices. This is character assassination, private investigators, surveillance photos, financial accusations. It's documentation, Karen, nothing more or less than the truth." She paced the kitchen, strategy shifting visibly behind her eyes. "Listen, Thomas, we can work this out. This whole thing with Mark, it was a mistake, a midlife crisis. We have 25 years together. We can go to counseling, rebuild." 2 months ago, that might have been possible, I acknowledged. Before I saw the text about your divorce plans. Before I learned how long this had been going on. Her expression hardened. "So that's it? No chance to explain or make amends?" "You've had countless chances to be honest. Instead, you continued lying while planning my destruction. The woman I married wouldn't have done that." "You'll regret this," she warned, voice low. "I'll fight you on every single point. The house, the custody arrangement, the financial terms. My lawyer will tear your case apart." I slid a folder across the counter. "Here's a complete copy of everything we've filed, including Sam's full investigation report. Before your lawyer makes promises, they should review the evidence, particularly the financial documentation." She opened the folder, color draining from her face as she saw the comprehensive timeline of her affair. The hotel receipts, the financial transfers to accounts I shouldn't have known about. "How did you get all this?" "The same way I've built my career, careful attention to details others overlook." Her phone rang. Mark again, I assumed. She stepped into the hallway to answer, her voice rising with each sentence. "What do you mean you can't talk? This affects both of us." "What do you mean, legal advice? Mark? Mark?" She returned to the kitchen, looking shell-shocked. "He hung up on me." "His attorney probably advised him to cease contact," I explained. "Standard procedure when evidence of an affair becomes part of legal proceedings." She sank onto a bar stool. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I had to." "You left me no choice." The front door opened as Emma and Jason arrived home from their after-school activities. They paused in the doorway, immediately sensing the tension. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" Jason asked. Karen and I exchanged a glance, perhaps our first moment of genuine communication in months. "We need to talk to you both," I said gently. "As a family." The temporary custody hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Karen arrived with her attorney, a sharp-featured woman known for aggressive tactics. I sat beside Patricia, documentation organized in labeled binders before us. Judge Harriet Coleman reviewed both filings before addressing the court. "This hearing will determine temporary custody and residence arrangements pending final divorce proceedings. I've reviewed the extensive documentation submitted by both parties." Karen's attorney began with passionate assertions about Karen's maternal dedication and my alleged controlling behavior. She painted me as financially vindictive, obsessed with surveillance, unwilling to work on the marriage. When Patricia's turn came, she methodically presented evidence contradicting each claim. Calendars showing my consistent presence at school events contrasted with Karen's absences. Financial records demonstrating my transparency versus Karen's hidden accounts. Testimony from Emma's therapist about her distress upon discovering her mother's affair. Most compelling was Emma's written statement, submitted confidentially to the judge, describing how she had discovered her mother's relationship with Mark and the impact it had on her sense of family security. Judge Coleman reviewed the evidence carefully before addressing Karen directly. "Mrs. Mitchell, these financial records show significant unexplained expenses from joint accounts used for activities related to your extramarital relationship. How do you explain these expenditures?" Karen's attorney attempted to intervene, but the judge persisted. "I'm asking your client directly, Counselor Mrs. Mitchell." Karen shifted uncomfortably. "Those were personal expenses. Thomas was aware of my spending habits throughout our marriage. Yet he has provided detailed documentation disputing that claim," Judge Coleman noted, turning to another exhibit. "And these text messages between you and Mr. Reynolds appear to discuss plans for financial arrangements after divorce, discussions that occurred before you had informed Mr. Mitchell of any marital issues." The hearing continued for another hour, with each of Karen's claims systematically dismantled by documented evidence. Her attorney's expression grew increasingly concerned as the case unraveled. Finally, Judge Coleman delivered her ruling. "Based on the substantial evidence presented, I am granting temporary primary residence of the minor children to Mr. Mitchell, with standard visitation rights to Mrs. Mitchell. The family home will remain the children's primary residence during proceedings. Additionally, I'm issuing a financial restraining order preventing further dissipation of marital assets." She fixed Karen with a stern look. "Mrs. Mitchell, the court takes a dim view of financial misconduct with marital funds. I strongly advise you and your counsel to consider your position carefully before the final hearing." As we left the courtroom, Karen's attorney pulled her aside, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. I overheard fragments. "Seriously consider settlement. Evidence is compelling, unlikely to improve at trial." Karen caught my eye as I passed. For a moment, her mask dropped completely, revealing not anger, but something closer to bewilderment, as if she couldn't comprehend how her carefully constructed plan had collapsed so thoroughly. "Your attorney is giving you good advice," I said quietly. "Settlement would be better for everyone, especially the children." She didn't respond, but I noticed her shoulders slump slightly as the reality of her situation finally seemed to register. Chess match concluded. Checkmate. 6 weeks after the temporary hearing, our new routine had begun taking shape. Karen had moved into a downtown apartment, seeing the children on weekends. The divorce proceedings continued, but with markedly less hostility since the initial hearing. I stood at the kitchen island, reviewing school forms for Emma's college applications, when Jason wandered in after soccer practice. "Hey, Dad, what's for dinner?" "Lasagna in the oven. Should be ready in 20. He grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl, hesitating before asking, "Is Mom coming to my game on Saturday?" "She said she would," I assured him. "She's been making all your home games." He nodded, relief visible on his face. Despite everything, the children needed both parents present in their lives, and I had never discouraged their relationship with Karen, regardless of my personal feelings. Emma joined us, dropping her backpack on a chair. "Dad, can you look at my personal essay tonight? It's due next week." "Absolutely." She began setting the table without being asked, one of many small changes in our household dynamics. The children had stepped up, taking more responsibility as we adjusted to our new reality. "Mrs. Baxter asked about you today," Emma mentioned casually. "She said to tell you they're having a neighborhood barbecue next weekend if we want to come." Social invitations had increased since the separation. Friends who had witnessed Karen's behavior over the years, but never commented now, offering support in subtle ways. "Sounds nice," I said. "Let's plan on it." Over dinner we discussed daily happenings, Jason's soccer tournament, Emma's debate team success, mundane details that formed the fabric of family life. Laughter came more easily now that the underlying tension had dissipated. Later, as I washed dishes, Emma lingered in the kitchen. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "I saw Mom yesterday. She seemed different, more like she used to be." I nodded, giving her space to continue. "She apologized to me, actually apologized for everything. The affair, the lying, putting me in the middle. She's never done that before." "That's good, Em. That's important." "She said she's in therapy now." Emma fiddled with a dish towel. "Do you think people can really change?" I considered the question carefully. I think people can learn and grow, especially when they face the consequences of their actions honestly. Your mom made serious mistakes, but she's still your mother. "Do you hate her?" Emma asked directly. "No," I replied truthfully. "I'm disappointed and hurt by her choices, but hate would only damage me. And you kids. We had 25 years together, most of them good." "That doesn't disappear." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied. "I'm glad you fought for us, Dad. Not just the custody thing, but for our stability." I hugged her, this young woman who had shouldered too much too soon. Some things are always worth fighting for. 3 months after the separation, I met my colleague Robert for lunch. He'd recently discovered his wife's infidelity and was still reeling, vacillating between confrontation and denial. "I don't know how you stayed so calm," he admitted, pushing his food around his plate. "I want to scream at her, throw her things on the lawn, call her parents, and tell them everything." "And how would that help your situation?" I asked gently. "It wouldn't, but it might make me feel better." "For about 10 minutes," I acknowledged. "Then you'd have undermined your position and given her evidence of emotional instability." He sighed. "So what's your secret? Zen meditation? Prescription drugs?" I smiled slightly. "Neither. I just recognized that this wasn't about winning an argument, but about securing a future. Emotional reactions might have felt satisfying, but would have cost me what mattered most: stability for my children and financial security for all of us." "But weren't you angry? Hurt?" "Incredibly," I admitted. But I channeled that into methodical preparation instead of confrontation. It wasn't about punishing Karen. It was about not allowing myself to be diminished by her choices. Robert nodded slowly. "My lawyer keeps telling me to document everything and avoid confrontation, but it feels like letting her get away with it. She's not getting away with anything. Reality has its own consequences. The question is whether you want to be collateral damage in her poor decisions. How are your kids handling everything? Better than expected. Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure. They know I'm stable, consistent, and putting them first. That matters more than the divorce itself. Robert took a long drink of water. I've been so focused on my wife's betrayal that I haven't thought enough about my daughter's stability. Start there, I advised. Make decisions that serve her well-being first. The rest will follow. As we parted, Robert clasped my shoulder. Thanks for showing there's a way through this with dignity. Driving back to the office, I reflected on how much my perspective had evolved. The initial shock and hurt had transformed into something unexpected. Not bitterness, but clarity about what truly mattered. Karen's betrayal had forced me to recognize strengths I hadn't known I possessed. Sometimes losing what you thought you had reveals what you truly need. 1 year after filing for divorce, the legal process was complete. The settlement had been remarkably straightforward once Karen recognized the strength of my evidence. She retained her retirement accounts and received a modest property settlement, while I maintained primary custody and the family home. I stood on the front porch, watching early summer twilight settle over the neighborhood. Emma was preparing for college orientation. Jason had 1 more year of high school. Our family had been reconfigured, but not destroyed. The sound of a car in the driveway announced Karen's arrival for our scheduled exchange. She had been taking Jason to dinner every Wednesday, part of our new co-parenting rhythm. "Evening, Thomas," she said as she approached the porch. Her demeanor had changed over the months, the defensive hostility replaced by something more subdued, perhaps even remorseful. "Karen, Jason's just finishing homework. He'll be down in a minute." She nodded, hesitating before adding, "Emma's graduation announcement came. It's beautiful. She worked hard on the design. There's a ticket for you in the envelope." "Thank you." She glanced at the porch swing where we had once spent summer evenings planning our future. "The roses look good this year. Jason's been helping with the garden. He has a knack for it." A moment of awkward silence stretched between us. 2 people who had known each other intimately for decades, now navigating the territory of polite distance. "Thomas," she began hesitantly, "I've wanted to say, what happened with Mark, with everything. I'm not proud of it. The therapist says I need to take responsibility without excuses." "I appreciate that," I said simply. "He left his wife too, you know, then left me 3 months later for someone at his gym." She laughed without humor. "Predictable, really." "Are you doing okay?" I asked, finding I genuinely wanted to know. "Getting there. New apartment, reconnecting with old friends, learning to live with my choices." She met my eyes directly. "You've done well with them, Thomas." "The kids, I mean, better than I would have." "We're managing," I acknowledged. Jason burst through the door, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Ready, Mom? Dad, I'll be back by 9, okay?" "Have fun," I told him, watching as they walked to Karen's car together. As they drove away, I considered the strange journey of the past year. The marriage I had believed would last a lifetime had ended, yet I had emerged stronger, more self-aware, more deliberately engaged with what mattered most. Next week, a colleague had introduced me to a divorced professor from the local university. We were meeting for coffee, my first tentative step toward whatever might come next. The future stretched before me, unplanned, but full of possibility. Not the future I had expected, but perhaps the one I needed, one built on my own terms, with clear-eyed understanding of both human frailty and resilience. Sometimes the most quiet moves in the game of life turn out to be the most powerful. Looking back now, I realize that what seemed like catastrophic betrayal actually revealed strengths I never knew I possessed. The discovery of my wife's affair could have demolished me if I'd allowed emotion to override strategy. Instead, it became the catalyst for reclaiming my agency and purpose. The lessons weren't what I expected. I learned that dignity doesn't require drama, that quiet, methodical response to provocation is ultimately more powerful than reactive outbursts. I discovered that documentation speaks louder than accusations, and that patience confounds those who mistake it for weakness. Most importantly, I learned that we are not defined by what happens to us, but by how we respond. Karen's choices were hers alone. My response was my responsibility. By refusing to let her betrayal dictate my behavior, I maintained something precious: self-respect that no court could award or deny. For those facing similar crossroads, remember this: the person who remains strategic when others grow emotional holds the advantage. The quiet ones aren't weak. They're gathering evidence, building support networks, and planning decisive moves, while others reveal their intentions through impulsive actions. This isn't about revenge. It's about refusing to be diminished by someone else's poor choices. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and your children is to stand firmly for what matters, even when doing so feels terribly difficult. My story continues beyond these pages, as does yours. Whatever challenges you face, know that dignity and strategic patience usually triumph over impulsive reaction. The game of life rewards those who think several moves ahead, especially when playing against opponents who underestimate your capabilities. Sometimes the quietest checkmate is the most definitive.